had to sum up the leadership he has provided to the roughly 50,000 airmen and military basic trainees he has helped shape, I would say, freaking awesome. I love you guys. So, if you ask Chief Usherwood how he is doing, his ready response is, of course, freaking awesome. It's also the way he lives his life and what he has strived for during his career in the Air Force. It is his mantra. It is how he has chosen to face every obstacle and challenge, and how he continues to motivate all of us around him. He is freaking awesome. So in honor of him today, I'm going to ask for your participation, and obviously you're already way ahead of the game. At various times, I'm going to ask you how you're doing, and if you would, I'd like you to respond.
Freaking awesome.
Yes, there it is. Also, if you ever, happen to see someone that looks like we're in danger of shedding a tear at any point during this ceremony, I'm going to need a freaking awesome to get us back on track. So in the beginning, Glen joined the Air Force in September 1985. His dad was in the Air Force, and although he retired when Glen was very young, growing up in Central Florida, he had enough exposure to military bases to know at 12 years of age that he wanted to join the military. Glen scored high enough on the Air Force aptitude test to pick any career field he wanted. He picked instrumentation mechanic. This highly technical job appealed to him, and an 18-year-old Glen thought it sounded cool too. After basic training, he went to Lowry Air Force Base, Colorado for 9 months to learn his job. From tech school, Glen's first assignment was to the sweet spot of Holloman Air Force Base, New Mexico. I read Glen's performance reports from these early days, and I have to say I was a little shocked. I don't want to say Glen was a super nerd, but as an instrumentation mechanic, he was doing very technical things and doing them extremely well. This is how some of his duty descriptions read. Operates and maintains Stranet's power line disturbance analyzers. One of his supervisors wrote, his meticulous malfunction analysis technique ensured the success of advanced guidance technology, fiber optics, gyroscope, and standard inertial navigation systems test programs. He eliminated a time-consuming centrifuge test procedure by designing and implementing an interface controller for the laser interferometer system on the centrifuge arm.
Yeah!
So clearly, I'm a personalist, but I have no idea what any of that is. But his supervisors were extremely happy with his job performance, and he was selected as the Guidance Test Division Airman of the Month 5 times during the same year.
Wow.
His first grader said, Airman Usherwood is very enthusiastic about being a member of the Air Force and his current assignment. His military bearing is exemplary. That definitely sounds like the Chief Usherwood we know. His duty performance was so stellar, he was selected for Senior Airman below the zone and promoted a year ahead of his peers. But Holloman wasn't all work. Glen met Kristen there, and love bloomed in the desert.
Freaking awesome.
Kristen was also in the Air Force then. She was a personalist. There you go. They married in early 1991 because Glen's job was so specialized, there were only 10 bases in the Air Force he could move to, and that summer they moved to Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska.
Freaking awesome.
While Glen had mostly done instrumentation with a research and development focus at Holloman, at Offutt he transitioned to be an instrumentation technician, conducting electronic combat testing on the B-52 bomber. Glen and Kristen spent 6 years at Offutt, and during this time a lot was going on. Glen was promoted to Staff Sergeant, and more importantly, Paige was born, and they grew their family to 3. A few years later, after 10 years of active duty service to her country, Kristen separated. In 1997, Glen's unit relocated from Offutt to Glen Air Force Base, Florida. Glen continued in the same job while continuing to grow professionally and to develop his technical expertise. He was promoted to Tech Sergeant during this assignment, and he became an instrumentation craftsman, performing procurement, installation, checkout, troubleshooting, and repair of instrumentation systems to support both the B-52 and the B-1 flight test programs. However, Glen's professional life was about to change in a significant and long-term way. While at Glen, Glen applied and was selected to become a military training instructor for an MTI.
Freaking awesome.
Freaking awesome.
After 2 years at Eglin, he was assigned to the premier gateway to the Air Force, Lackland Air Force Base. The Escher Woods arrived at Lackland in September 1999, and with the exception of a 1-year remote tour to South Korea, Glen would spend an incredible 10 years at basic military training, BMT, and transform thousands of civilian recruits into brand new, hard-charging airmen. From 1999 to 2003, Glen was responsible for the daily activities, supervision, and core military acculturation and training of more than 1,280 basic military trainees each year. He was also responsible for supervising and training 10 other military training instructors. These were very busy times, filled with both challenges and accomplishments far different than what Glen had experienced during his first 12 years in the instrumentation world. Glen led parades. He disciplined both trainees and instructors and instilled in thousands of young men and women the Air Force core values and what it means to be an airman. He worked a lot and he yelled a lot. He told me this was the most challenging, most physically demanding, and the most rewarding job he held in the Air Force. During this time, he was named a distinguished graduate from NCO Academy, and the Air Force recognized him as a master military training instructor, an honor reserved for only the top 10% of instructors across the service. How are we doing?
Freaking awesome.
In 2003, the Air Force made Glen a master sergeant. Most airmen complete MTI duty and return to their career field. For Glen, his career field had merged with communications by then, and he had found his calling as an MTI. So he volunteered to go to Camp Humphreys, South Korea for a year, in order to come back to Lackland as an MTI for a second tour. He returned from Korea in September of 2004. He completed his 4-year tour at MTI, his second tour, and then as an MTI, and then BMT asked him to stay for a 5th year. Then he asked to stay for a 6th year, so that Paige could finish high school there. During this tour, Glen earned 2 Community College of the Air Force degrees, one in Electronic Systems Technology, and one Instructor of Technology and Military Science degree. He attended Senior NCO Academy, and he graduated in the top 10% of his class as a distinguished graduate. He was given greater supervisory and leadership responsibility, culminating as a squadron superintendent. And of course, he excelled at each new challenge, because that's what he does. Comments from his supervisors include first-rate senior NCO dedicated to the BMT mission, perfect role model for recruits, contagious attitude, superior leader, BMT guru with accolades at every level, and unbridled passion for the enlisted corps and the Air Force mission. As a squadron superintendent, his boss wrote, A+ leader, mentor, and wingman. Absolute honor to work with him. In total, over 10 years, Glen played a significant part in transforming almost 50,000 civilians into warrior airmen. During this assignment, he was promoted twice, and when he departed Lackland in October of 2010, the Air Force confirmed Glen standing in the top 1% of all enlisted personnel with promotion to Chief Master Sergeant.
Freaking awesome.
Totally beat me to it. Nice job. So next, Glen joined the Keesler team as the Chief of the Qualification Training Flight, or Q Flight, in the 81st Training Group. After 10 years, he had returned to his core career field, which by this time had become very cyber-focused. As Glen does, he brought his motivation and his A game, and he made the people and the unit better. He was recognized by the training group leadership for his contagious, enthusiastic attitude and outstanding people skills, leadership, and judgment. They selected him to be the group superintendent. During his over 2 years in the training group, Glen developed the Warrior Walk program. Warrior Walk, which some of you are probably familiar with today, ensured permanent party leadership were present in the triangle after duty hours and on the weekends to provide eyes-on security and safety for over 12,000 airmen going through technical training. Warrior Walk was also adopted as an Air Force best practice. Glen also met every single one of those 12,000 airmen as they got off the bus upon arrival, because that's the kind of leader he is. Then Glen joined the Mission Support Group. As our superintendent in spring of 2013, he brought his freaking awesome attitude, superb attention to detail, and focused on the Air Force standards and the core values, and he upped our game as he had done in the training group. In true Chief Escherwood fashion, as Glen realized he was nearing retirement, he raised his hand, he checked out his Air Force bucket list, and he raised his hand again, this time to deploy to Africa. Glen volunteered for a 6-month deployment to Niamey, Niger, as the group superintendent for the 409th Air Expeditionary Group. Over 6 months, he traveled thousands of miles, leading 500 airmen at 3 geographically separated locations on the African continent. During that time, he corrected outdated reporting instructions and brought the first Deers machine to AFRICOM locations, in turn saving over $100,000 in travel costs and downtime for deployed airmen. As usual, Chief Escherwood left his deployed location better than he found it. I asked Glen, who or what was the most important influence on his Air Force career? He said there are several, but I'm only going to mention a few. His mom, Shirley, his dad, and Kristen, one of his first bosses, Archie Crawford, a retired chief who chewed his butt every time it was necessary, and Chief Retired Nancy Judge, who told him once, Glen, that's a great attitude to have if you don't mind retiring as a Master Sergeant. Having studied Glen's career and worked with him over the last year, I believe attitude has been a defining factor in Glen's success. He calls himself a simple country boy from Central Florida, but we know he clearly was blessed with great capability, great intelligence, a wonderful family, and along with all of that, an incredibly positive attitude that permeates everything he does and positively affects the people he leads and knows. As I said in the beginning, I really can't overstate the superb leadership, dedication, and service Chief Escherwood has given his country, his Air Force, and his airmen. He is a role model to emulate. Glen, we wish you and your family all the best in the next chapter. No matter where your future leads, the Air Force will always be a part of you and will always be home. In closing, I just want to say one more time, Chief Master Sergeant Escherwood, you are freaking awesome.